Okay, so we are now sitting in a X4M, which is the equivalent of the X3M. So we're using that as our basis for comparison today. So you'll note when I start the engine, it sounds a lot angrier already. It's also angry I don't have my seatbelt on yet, so let's rectify that. And we will now see, I'm going to do the same sequence of events. Now, first difference is the shifter is very different. The transmission here, to go into drive, I had to not just pull it backwards like the other car, but I also had to go over to be like, it's almost like you're unlocking a weapon, like the safety is off. The other thing you have in this car, this allows you to control your shift speeds. The least intense shifts are going to be on the bottom, and then you can go up to a middle level or up even more to a higher level. That's going to impact how much of that punching you feel during the shift. So I like a more smooth shift. I'm going to go into the smoothest of the modes. And there's a lot of configuration with this car. You can see on the steering wheel itself, you've got an M button for M1 and M2. This allows you to set profiles in the car. So if I go to my mode, I can set up the car the way I want it, right? Also, when I did that, the gauges changed, and you can see the tachometer it's raising vertically instead of a conventional tachometer that would wrap clockwise. So here we go. I already like this car more. We are pulling away. We've gone 5 feet. And journalists talk about the fact that this car has more throttle lag. In my estimation with these cars, lag is not the problem. Too much suddenness is the problem. See, I was able to pull away there. I don't even know what mode I'm in at the moment, to be quite honest with you. Road. So there's road, there's sport, and there's track. That to me feels a lot more reasonable. Something I can feel is these tires are so sticky compared to the other tires. I can hear it picking up little pebbles and throwing it against the metalwork of the car and the wheel arches of the car. That indicates to me that the grip is going to be there at the street level, and yet this doesn't necessarily feel more uncomfortable than the car we just drove, which is supposed to be the lower performing of the two cars. So I'm going to try to go, oh, here we go. So I can set up different things here. So I'm going to put, so engine's inefficient. I'll put this in sport and see what that feels like. No, it's actually too heavy. And I'll go 4-wheel drive sport. Oh, so I can only do that with DSC off. So M dynamic mode. This is something I worked on with BMW back in 2003, and it's been in cars now for about 15 or more years. So engine inefficient, chassis and comfort, and steering and comfort. See, I'm able to brake the car to a stop more gently. I feel, even though we haven't gone fast yet, I feel more in control of this car. And I feel smoother in this car, which is counterintuitive. This is the higher performing version. I thought this is the one that was going to rip my face off and hand it back to me in a to-go bag. But it's not doing that at all. It's actually very docile, partly because I'm in these modes. But I'm going to punch it the same way I did last time. Very different characteristics. When I punched it, nothing happened. Really, nothing happened. And then everything happened. But it happened in a way where the car felt excited to get to work. It didn't feel like it was losing control. It felt like it was gaining control. It's a completely different step change from the other car. The other car feels like a car that's being taxed to do something it doesn't want to do. Whereas in this car, again, because we have a BMW M3 componentry set, the car wants to do this. So now I'm going to ramp up the engine response. In fact, I'm going to go as high as possible. See how responsive can... Oh, there it is. There's the responsiveness that was missing. It's a little too sudden, so I'm going to go to Sport. That feels more reasonable. I don't feel the need to really deviate from this setting. What I might do is have the transmission... I'm going to go to the second of the three modes and see if the shifts are... Actually, I'll go to the top of the three modes. Let's see the extreme cases. So again, we're doing the same drive route. I traveled 5 feet, immediately think it's a better car. In fact, I would say out the window we have a Porsche Macan that I referenced in the last video. This car feels like more of a Porsche or a Macan competitor, where you feel like you're enjoying the drive even before you go fast. Whereas the other car felt like that Ford Explorer ST, where you felt like it was an SUV that was being asked to do things an SUV shouldn't be doing. So we're gonna be a little violent here. Everyone ready? The car so intensely leapt forward and sideways at the same time that it hopped. It hopped as the tires were scrabbling for traction. So I was letting, and again, I'm in a setting that allows that behavior. If I were to go into full four-wheel drive mode, then the car wouldn't be allowed the rotation and it wouldn't be allowed to do as much beyond the limits of grip that it's being allowed to do. But I've freed it up, even though I'm technically not supposed to on this drive. I figure with as much experience as I have doing this sort of thing, I know what to look for, I know what not to do. And as you can see, I'm not really pushing the car all that much outside of those initial acceleration bursts. So let's take a fast corner. Again, the front of the car slid, but it did so in a way because the tires are so grippy, the way it slid, I could feel like an eraser just kind of sliding across the paper. And I knew the rate that it was sliding, I could feel it ramping up, and then I could feel it gently ramping back down. It wasn't like the other car that was like skipping and hopping to get traction. This is a very different car. This makes me want to find a place to do things. And when I'm doing this with the engine actually feels really excited that we're doing this. No real vibration. Sure, it's loud. Another fast corner here. Wow. What a lovely, lovely all-wheel drive system. This is what I've been hoping for from BMW. They had so much power before, but as Pirelli used to say, power is nothing without control. Now BMW's reached the point where they have an all-wheel drive system that can actually harness that power. But unlike other car companies' all-wheel drive systems, the system isn't there to tamp down on the fun and make it no fun. In fact, it's there to encourage you to have that fun. We're on a city street deploying 507 or so horsepower with complete control in a car that I've driven for 5 minutes. This level of confidence is what BMW M used to mean. And there was a period of time when BMW M had lost their way. They had lost that balance between control and power. It was so power heavy that you'll see a lot of crashed BMW M cars from that era because they didn't have the control in the steering and the brakes and the chassis that they had the firepower in the engine. So now we're at a point where I've completely forgotten to drive the car in all these other modes because I'm having so much fun. So let's just drive it, let's just drive it more normally. Now I'm driving it like it's more like a car that I own. Looks like this guy ahead of us is bringing more tires for BMW to use. Yeah, those look like they may be in fact going to the event. Yeah, now we're in this about this car is if you like this kind of behavior from the car, you don't have to get an X3M to have it. You could get an M3 sedan and have this same behavior. If you're smart enough to not live in the US, you could have this in a wagon form. They have an M3 Touring in other markets. Now that would be a perfect all-rounder. So as you can tell, I'm completely surprised. I thought that this car would be way too much. In fact, it's easier to control. It's more enjoyable. So when I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But you know what's right? The way the engineers attacked this problem. We're in a high-riding car that doesn't feel high-riding. And in that sense, only when we got to the point where the tire was letting go was I should be in something lower and less top-heavy for a moment like this. So I think if you do drive the car in extremis, you will crave, why did I get an X3? Why did I get an X4? I could have had an M3. If you actually push your car, I would encourage you, consider whether whether the M3 sedan is going to accommodate your passengers and your belongings as well as this car does. If you don't need that SUV utility, if you're just buying for the all-wheel drive, not the ground clearance, not the cargo capacity of the fold-down rear seats, strongly consider an M3 instead of an X3 or an X4 with the M specification, because I think the one thing about this car is I want to drive it that way, but you reach a point where you're like, this is just dumb. If you like dumb, you like silly, you like adrenal, you like how the hell does this thing even exist, this might be the car for you. As I'm calming down, as I'm cooling down, as the car is doing the same, the Macan comes to mind again. The Macan, I think, better balances that Jekyll and Hyde, better balances that everyday streetable car with a car you can really push and enjoy. I think I need to spend a lot more time with this car. I think anyone would need to spend a lot more time with this car and go through this matrix of possibilities and the transmission and everything else on offer. This is a car I think I would need a solid week with to start to dig into and appreciate and really understand. But again, if you're looking at these cars, drive them all. Drive them all, and drive them as much as you possibly can before you plunk down your money. Because if there's one thing the internet has done, it's misled us. I'm a perfect example. I read a few reviews and I thought I knew the composition of these two cars. Clearly, the journalists and the internet had misled my perception, and I'd hate to see the same happen to you. Let me know what you think. Look forward to hearing from you.